6 assassins, 1 hallway, 0 exits. They had her cornered in the dark, blades drawn, certain this was the night the Vantari Princess finally died. They didn't even look twice at the quiet human standing behind her, Euros, the one who never spoke, never smiled, never so much as raised his voice in 3 long years of guarding her. Big mistake. Because the moment the first blade moved toward her throat, something in that silent man's eyes changed. And in the next 4 seconds, everything these assassins thought they knew about humans got rewritten in blood. Nobody on Velmara Station really knew what to make of Marcus Reyes. For 3 years, he'd stood outside Princess Calith's chambers, arms crossed, face blank, saying maybe 10 words a day, if that. The Vantari court called him the shadow behind his back, a euro, half out of respect, half because it unsettled them how a human, of all species, could stand so still for so long without ever looking bored, tired, or distracted. Calith didn't call him anything. She just trusted him, plain and simple, in a way she trusted almost nobody else in a royal court crawling with political snakes and half-loyal nobles. The Vantari Empire had been at war with the breakaway Kesh Syndicate for going on a decade now, a slow-bleeding conflict fought mostly in the shadows, a Euro sabotage, assassination attempts, quiet betrayals dressed up as diplomacy. Calith, as the last surviving heir to the Vantari throne after her father's assassination 2 years back, had become the Syndicate's #1 target. Every royal guard captain before Marcus had either quit, been bought off, or ended up dead within a year. Marcus was different. He'd come through an obscure human mercenary contract. Nobody in the Vantari court had bothered vetting too closely, a Euros. Desperate times, thin budget, a princess nobody powerful wanted to protect anymore. 3 years later, he was the only bodyguard who'd survived long enough to matter. "You're quiet again," Calith said one evening, walking the long observation deck overlooking Velmara's ringed horizon, Marcus 2 steps behind her as always. "You're always quiet. Doesn't it get exhausting saying nothing all day?" "Talking's not the job, Your Highness," he said simply. "What is the job then?" He didn't answer right away. Just kept scanning the corridor ahead, the way he always did, eyes flicking over every shadow, every doorway, every possible angle a threat could come from. "Making sure you see tomorrow," he finally said. "That's the whole job." Calith smiled a little at that, though she didn't fully understand yet just how seriously he meant it. She had no idea that the shadow nickname the court used so casually was closer to the truth than any of them realized, a Euros, that behind that silence was a man who'd walked away from a life most humans back on Earth didn't even know existed. She was about to find out. Because that same night, deep in Velmara Station's lower maintenance levels, 6 Kesh Syndicate assassins were finishing the last of their preparations. Confident tonight was finally the night they'd succeed where a dozen others had failed. They had no idea who was actually standing in their way. The Kesh Syndicate didn't send amateurs anymore. Not after 11 failed attempts on Calith's life over 2 years. This time, they'd sent their best, a Euros, a 6-person cell led by a veteran operative named Threx, a Kesh soldier who'd personally overseen the assassination of Calith's father and considered this contract unfinished business. Trex's plan was clean, patient, and built entirely around one piece of intelligence his handlers were confident about. The human bodyguard was a non-factor. Just muscle. Just a quiet meat shield the Vantari court had thrown in front of their princess of desperation. Nothing that would meaningfully slow down 6 trained killers. He's never engaged a real threat. Threx told his team during final briefing, standing over holographic layout of Velmara Station's lower levels. 3 years of guard duty and not 1 confirmed kill on his record. Whatever he was before, he isn't that anymore. Focus on the princess. The human dies easy or he doesn't die at all, a Euros, either way, he's not the problem. It was, in hindsight, the single worst assumption Threx would ever make. The plan itself was solid. A engineered power failure in Sector 12 would cut security feeds for exactly 90 seconds, a Euros. Enough time to breach Calith's private observation corridor through a maintenance access point. Nobody on the Vantari security team had bothered reinforcing. 6 assassins, night vision optics, close quarters blades to avoid triggering the station's energy weapon detection grid. In, kill out. Before anyone even knew the lights had gone dark, they'd rehearsed the timing a dozen times. Threx was confident. His team was confident. Nothing about this operation should have gone wrong. At 20:0300 hours, right on schedule, Sector 12 went dark. Marcus felt it before the alarms even triggered, a Euro. A subtle pressure change in the corridor air. The kind of thing most people wouldn't notice, but that old instincts never quite let you forget. He'd felt something similar exactly 4 times in his old life. Each time, right before things got very bad, very fast. "Your Highness," he said quietly, already moving Caliph back from the observation windows, positioning his own body between her and the darkened corridor ahead. "We need to move. Now, Marcus. Wata now, Your Highness." But it was already too late for the easy way out. The maintenance access panel at the far end of the corridor hissed open, and 6 shapes moved out of the darkness with practiced, silent precision Euros, exactly the way Threx had trained them to. Caliph froze. Marcus didn't. Threx's team fanned out fast, cutting off both ends of the corridor in under 3 seconds Aero textbook containment, exactly the way they drilled it. No windows, no alternate access points, nothing but reinforced Vantari steel on every side. A perfect kill box. Caliph backed against the observation glass, heart hammering, watching 6 blades catch the emergency lighting as the assassins closed in. She'd faced attempts before, but never like this a Euro. Never so close. Never with this much precision. Never with an exit that simply didn't exist. "Marcus, Euro, stay behind me." His voice hadn't changed at all. Not a flicker of fear in it, not even urgency, just calm, flat certainty, like a man commenting on the weather. "Whatever happens next, don't move." Trex stepped forward slightly ahead of his team, studying Marcus with something between curiosity and dismissal. "Step aside, human. This doesn't have to include you." Marcus said nothing, just watched him. That same blank expression the Vantari court had spent 3 years mistaking for emptiness. "Last chance," Threx said. "Step aside." Still nothing. Trex gave the signal. What happened over the next 4 seconds would later become the most heavily reviewed security footage in Velmara Station's history, studied and restudied by Vantari military analysts, who genuinely struggled to process what they were seeing. The first assassin moved in with a killing strike aimed at Caliph's exposed side of Euros, and simply never completed the motion. Marcus was already there, closing the distance a blur that the corridor's sensors barely managed to capture, redirecting the blade's strike with his forearm while driving the assassin's own weapon back into him with brutal mechanical efficiency. The second and third assassins converged simultaneously, expecting to overwhelm him through sheer numbers. They'd trained for a bodyguard. They hadn't trained for whatever Marcus Reyes actually was. He moved through them like something that had done this exact kind of fight 100 times before. Every motion economical, nothing wasted, nothing hesitant. The complete opposite of 3 years of quiet, careful stillness the Vantari court thought defined him. Trex, watching 2 of his best operatives go down in under 2 seconds, felt something he hadn't felt in years, standing across from a human, genuine fear. Threx had built his entire career on reading opponents fast, adjusting fast, surviving by never underestimating a threat twice. He wasn't going to make that mistake a 3rd time. He signaled his remaining 3 operatives to fall back into a defensive formation, buying himself a few precious seconds to actually process what he was looking at. Marcus stood between them and Caliph, breathing steady, expression still unreadable, 2 Kesh assassins on the ground behind him a Euros, one unconscious, one groaning and clutching a shattered wrist. Not dead. Threx noticed that immediately. A man capable of what he'd just witnessed could have killed both of them easily. He'd chosen not to. "You're not standard Vantari military," Threx said slowly, buying time, studying Marcus for any tell, any weakness. "What are you?" For the first time since the fight started, Marcus actually answered him. "Used to be Earth Special Operations. Deep cover unit. Doesn't exist on paper, never did." His voice was still flat, still calm, but something colder had crept into it now. "Left that life a long time ago. Figured protecting one person quietly was better than what I used to do." "And what did you used to do?" Marcus's eyes flicked briefly toward Caliph, still pressed against the observation glass behind him, watching this entire exchange with wide, stunned eyes a Euros, 3 years of the shadow suddenly making a terrifying kind of sense. "Whatever it took," Marcus said simply. "Same as now." Threx had heard rumors, distantly. Years ago, a Euro stories about Earth's old deep cover programs, elite operatives trained for the kind of missions no government wanted officially attached to their name. Most of them believed disbanded or destroyed, after Earth's forces got pushed back during the Korath conflicts on the outer colonies. He'd never once considered that one of them might be standing in front of him now, calmly protecting a Vantari princess nobody powerful wanted to bother saving. It didn't matter how he'd ended up here. What mattered was that Threx's perfect, patient, 2-year operation had just collapsed in under 10 seconds because of a single piece of bad intelligence. The human bodyguard was, in fact, very much the problem. Fall back, Threx ordered his remaining operatives, voice tight. Full retreat. Now. But Marcus was already moving again, closing the distance before the order even finished leaving Threx's mouth, and Threx realized, with the cold, sinking certainty of a man who'd finally read the situation correctly 1 second too late, that retreat might not actually be an option anymore. Threx's remaining operatives scattered toward the maintenance access point they'd breached through, discipline cracking under the sudden, brutal realization that this mission had gone catastrophically sideways. Marcus let 2 of them go a Euros. His priority had never been a body count, just keeping the corridor between Calith and any remaining threat. Threx himself didn't run. 20 years in the Syndicate had taught him that running from a fight you couldn't win rarely worked out better than finishing it on your own terms. He drew a second blade, a compact energy dagger he'd kept holstered as backup, and squared up against Marcus with the grim focus of a man who understood exactly how outmatched he was and had decided to make it count anyway. "You know this doesn't end well for you," Marcus said, still calm, still unreadable, positioning himself so Threx had no angle back toward Calith. "Your handlers already know this operation failed. Whatever happens next, you're not getting paid for it." "Wasn't really about the pay," Threx said quietly. He'd been the one to personally kill Calith's father 2 years ago, had lived with the Syndicate's unfinished business ever since, the nagging sense that the job wasn't truly complete while the heir still drew breath. "Some debts you finish yourself." He came in fast, dagger leading, a genuinely skilled strike that would have ended most fights against most opponents. Marcus wasn't most opponents. He sidestepped, caught Threx's wrist mid-strike, and used the assassin's own forward momentum against him, driving him hard into the corridor's reinforced wall. The fight that followed was short, brutal, and utterly one-sided in a way that would later leave Vantari security analysts genuinely uncomfortable watching the footage back. Threx was good. Threx was, by any reasonable measure, one of the most dangerous operatives the Kesh Syndicate had ever fielded. He simply wasn't in the same category as the man standing across from him. Marcus ended it fast, disarming Threx and pinning him against the wall hard enough to make continuing the fight physically impossible, but stopping their Euro, not a killing blow, just total, absolute control of the situation. "Give me a reason," Marcus said quietly, "and I'll finish this. Otherwise, you're going to tell your handlers exactly what happened here tonight. Every detail." Threx, gasping, staring into the flat, calm eyes of a man he'd completely underestimated, understood for the first time exactly how badly the Kesh Syndicate's intelligence had failed them. "They're never going to believe me," he managed. "Not my problem," Marcus said. "Yours." By the time Vantari security finally restored power to Sector 12, the fight was long over. What they found instead was 6 subdued Kesh Syndicate operatives, secured and disarmed, a shaken but entirely unharmed Princess Calith, and Marcus Reyes standing exactly where he always stood a Euros. Quiet still, expression giving away absolutely nothing about what had just happened in that corridor. Word spread through the Vantari court within hours, exaggerated and re-exaggerated with each retelling, but the core of it stayed true enough. The human bodyguard everyone had dismissed for 3 years, as little more than decorative muscle, had single-handedly dismantled the most dangerous assassination attempt the Syndicate had ever mounted against the throne. High Counselor Varen, the court's senior political fixer and one of the few nobles who genuinely opposed hiring some desperate human mercenary 3 years earlier, requested an emergency audience the very next morning. "You understand," Varen said carefully. Standing before Marcus and Calith in the throne chamber, clearly struggling to reconcile years of quiet dismissal with what security footage had just shown him, that what you did last night was, frankly, extraordinary. "The court owes you a significant debt." Marcus said nothing, as usual, standing his customary 2 steps behind Calith's throne. "He doesn't want a debt," Calith said, before Varen could continue. She'd barely slept, replaying those 4 seconds over and over, watching a man she thought she'd known for 3 years reveal an entire hidden life in the span of a single hallway. "He just wants to keep doing his job." "With respect, Your Highness, after last night, I think the court needs to understand exactly who's been standing behind your throne this entire time." Calith turned to look at Marcus directly. really looking at him. Maybe for the first time since he'd started this job 3 years earlier. Is that true? Do you want them to know? Marcus considered the question for a long moment, the same careful, unhurried way he considered everything. Doesn't matter what they know, he finally said. Matters that you're still breathing this morning. That's the only part of last night that mattered to me. Kalith felt something shift in her chest hearing that euro, not surprised this time, but something warmer, something she hadn't quite let herself feel about the quiet man who'd stood behind her for 3 years. Varen, watching the exchange, understood he wasn't going to get a dramatic confession or a detailed history out of this human. But he also understood, with sudden and complete clarity, that Marcus Reyes wasn't just the most effective bodyguard the Vantari throne had ever employed. He was about to become the single most important reason the Kesh Syndicate would think twice before trying anything like this again. News of Threx's failed operation reached Kesh Syndicate High Command within 2 days, and the reaction was immediate, furious, and deeply humiliating for an organization that had spent 2 years building a reputation for patient, inevitable success against the Vantari throne. Syndicate Director Malik Vor, the shadowy figure ultimately responsible for the campaign against Kalith, reviewed the recovered footage personally, watching 4 seconds of combat that completely upended everything his intelligence division had assured him about the princess's human bodyguard. Non-factor, Vor repeated, quoting his own intelligence briefing back at the room full of silent, uncomfortable analysts responsible for that assessment. That's the word your report used. Non-factor. Nobody in the room had a good answer for that. Vor had a decision to make. Double down, escalate, send a larger force capable of overwhelming whatever Marcus Reyes actually was euros, or reconsider whether this campaign was still worth the resources it was costing the Syndicate. 2 years, over a dozen failed attempts, and now an operative as skilled as Threx neutralized in seconds by a single human. Full dossier, Vor finally said. I want to know everything about this man. Where he came from, what he actually is, what kind of program produced him. I'm not sending another team in blind. That order would take weeks to produce meaningful results, because Marcus Reyes's actual service history was buried under years of intentional obscurity euros, the kind of deep classification that Earth's old special operations programs specialized in, precisely to prevent situations like this one. What Vor's analysts eventually pieced together was fragmentary but unsettling. References to a unit that had operated during the darkest years of Earth's conflict with the Korath Empire, a unit with an unofficial reputation for accomplishing missions other forces considered impossible, a unit that had technically been disbanded years ago after Earth's forces reorganized following the Outer Colony liberations, disbanded on paper, apparently still very much active in practice, at least in the case of one quiet, extraordinarily dangerous man who'd chosen to spend his retirement guarding a Vantari princess nobody else wanted to protect. Vor stared at the incomplete dossier for a long time, weighing 2 years of investment against the very real possibility that continuing this campaign meant sending more operatives to face someone even more capable than Threx had been. For the first time since the campaign against Kalith began, the Kesh Syndicate started seriously considering whether this fight was actually winnable. While the Syndicate deliberated, life on Velmara Station slowly found a new rhythm euros, one where Marcus's role had fundamentally changed, whether he wanted it to or not. The court no longer saw him as decorative muscle. Guards who used to barely acknowledge him now watched him with open respect. Kalith, most of all, found herself seeing him differently too. You could have told me, she said one evening. The two of them walking the same observation deck as always, though the silence between them felt different now euros, less like distance, more like comfortable familiarity finally deepening into something else. About your past. About what you actually were before this job. Would it have changed anything? Marcus asked. Kalith thought about that honestly. No, I don't think it would have. I trusted you either way. Then it didn't need saying. She smiled slightly at that, shaking her head. You're impossible, you know that? Been told worse. They walked in silence for a while longer, the twin suns setting over Velmara's rings, casting long gold light across the observation deck. For 3 years, this had been a routine patrol, nothing more. Tonight, it felt like something quietly, significantly different, though neither of them said so directly. The court wants to give you a formal title, Kalith said eventually. Something official. Head of Royal Security, maybe higher. Varen's been pushing for it since the attack. Don't need a title, I know. But you're going to get pushed into one anyway, probably. That's how this court works. She glanced at him sideways. Would that bother you, being visible instead of just standing quietly in the background? Marcus considered the question the same careful way he considered everything, weighing 3 years of comfortable invisibility against whatever came next. Only thing that's ever mattered to me is that you're safe, he said finally. Title doesn't change that job. Doesn't change how I do it, either. That's not really an answer. Closest one I've got. Caliph let it go. But something had settled between them that night that neither of them needed to name out loud. Euros. A partnership built on 3 years of quiet trust, tested and proven under the worst possible circumstances, now becoming something the entire Vantari court would soon have to reckon with. Because whatever the Kesh Syndicate decided to do next, one thing had become absolutely clear across the Empire. The quiet human standing behind the throne wasn't going anywhere. 3 weeks after Threx's failed operation, Director Vor made his final decision. Against the advice of half his own command staff, he authorized one last attempt at Euros, not a stealth operation this time, but an overwhelming direct assault. A full strike team of 20 operatives hitting Velmara Station's royal wing simultaneously, betting that sheer numbers could accomplish what precision and stealth had failed to achieve. It was, in hindsight, exactly the kind of desperate escalation that comes from an organization unwilling to admit it's already lost. Marcus felt the shift in station security patterns hours before the attack actually began. Euros. Small anomalies, minor communication delays, the kind of subtle preparation that a truly careful eye could catch if it knew what to look for. He'd spent 3 years learning to notice exactly those kinds of details. Something's coming, he told Caliph quietly that evening. Bigger than last time. How much bigger? Enough that I'm not doing this alone this time. For the first time since taking this job, Marcus actively coordinated with Vantari Royal Security a Euros, sharing tactical assessments, positioning guard rotations, treating the entire royal wing like a defensive perimeter instead of a simple patrol route. Varen, watching this transformation with something between awe and relief, finally understood what having Marcus Reyes fully invested in the court's defense actually looked like. When Vor's 20-operative strike team hit the royal wing at 0300 hours, they walked into a defense that had been 3 weeks in careful preparation, not a caught-off-guard hallway with nowhere to run. Vantari Royal Guards, coordinated for the first time with genuine tactical precision, held key choke points while Marcus moved through the fight like something built specifically for exactly this kind of overwhelming engagement. The battle for Velmara's royal wing lasted 11 minutes and ended with the complete collapse of Vor's strike force. A Euros operatives captured, weapons secured. The Syndicate's most ambitious operation against the Vantari throne turned into their most catastrophic failure. Caliph, secured deep in a reinforced safe room throughout the entire engagement, emerged afterward to find Marcus waiting exactly where he always waited, exhausted but steady, the fight already fading from his expression back into that familiar, quiet calm. "It's over," he told her simply. "You're safe." Word of the failed assault reached Director Vor within the hour, and this time there was no question left to deliberate. 2 years, over a dozen failed attempts, and a final catastrophic loss that had cost the Syndicate nearly its entire strike capability. The campaign against Princess Caliph was finished. Everyone in the Kesh Syndicate High Command understood that now. 6 months later, the Kesh Syndicate formally withdrew its campaign against the Vantari throne. A quiet diplomatic concession that Director Vor would never publicly admit was directly caused by a single human bodyguard nobody had bothered to properly investigate 2 years earlier. The war didn't fully end a Euros. Old conflicts like this one rarely do a Euros, but the assassination campaign, the years of shadow warfare aimed specifically at Caliph, finally completely stopped. Velmara Station changed too, slowly but unmistakably. Caliph took the throne fully, no longer the last surviving heir living under constant threat, but a genuinely secure ruler with the confidence to start actual reforms across the empire. Varen became her closest political ally instead of a skeptical obstacle, and Marcus Reyes remained exactly where he'd always been a Euros, 2 steps behind the throne, quiet, watchful, entirely uninterested in the formal titles the court kept trying to give him. "You could have anything you wanted, you know," Caliph told him one evening, months after the Syndicate's withdrawal, the two of them walking that same familiar observation deck under Velmara's twin suns. Any position in the Empire. Any recognition. You saved this entire throne, Marcus. Twice. Already got what I wanted, he said. Which is? He glanced at her, something rare and warm flickering briefly across that famously unreadable expression. Same thing I wanted 3 years ago. Making sure you see tomorrow. Calith smiled, shaking her head at how little that answer had changed despite absolutely everything else. You're really not going to make this easy for me, are you? Wouldn't know how, Marcus said. Never really been the easy type. They kept walking, the station humming quietly around them, safe in a way it hadn't been in years, and somewhere far across the Empire, the story of that night a Euro, the 6 assassins, the cornered princess, the silent human bodyguard who'd done the unthinkable a Euros, had already become legend, retold in every corner of Vantari space, as proof of exactly what humans were truly capable of when something worth protecting was on the line. Because in the end, the Kesh Syndicate hadn't just underestimated one man. They'd underestimated an entire species' capacity for quiet, unbreakable loyalty a Euros, the kind that doesn't announce itself, doesn't ask for recognition, and doesn't back down, no matter how many blades come out of the dark. And that, more than any weapon or any war, was the one thing they never truly understood.